Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our weekly market overview where we take a look at how the market has been going, see if we can find some clues as to where it's gonna go. Um, Quick disclaimer, anything you see in this video is not financial advice, it's merely for educational purposes. And with that, let's get started.
Yeah, Smoove, we cannot see a screen.
Cannot see my screen.
Yeah, that's kind of just says loading, but it does not load for me.
Here, let me stop and start it again.
Mhm.
I don't know why it does it. Every time I start the recording, it does that.
I think it is because of the recording. Someone
All right,
said that.
That's good.
all righty. All right. Before I get started, just quick update on this week. So this week is a short week. So on Thursday the market is closed. As well as Wednesday we're gonna have our Fed rate decision. So Powell's gonna make that announcement whether he's gonna hold or reduce interest rates or even hike them. Um, that's gonna come out on Wednesday, and I believe I think that's probably the most major event. So like the market can literally do a massive U-turn or a ridiculous rally on Wednesday. So just bear that in mind going into this week. Not only do we have a short week, we do have a week full of very important news, and as well as our OpEx is this week. Basically, our option expiry, or you can consider the monthly option expiry for your indices is this Friday. So that also tends to have exaggerated moves. So I would apply caution going into this week as things are moving slow. Don't rush into anything too quickly. um, and as well as any dramatic pullbacks, unless there's strong follow through. There may be a lot of indecision going into this week until that recut decision. So just bear that in mind. All right. So first and foremost, the first thing I like to look at is our SPY weekly candle here. So with our weekly candle, we do see a little bit of a rejection, not too heavy. For me, it seems more of exhaustion near the highs here, right? Our previous highs. We do have higher lows, higher highs setting up. So as far as trend wise, we are still, uptrending. The uptrend did not fail just yet. But I do see a little bit of hesitation near the upper bounds here, right? So last week we had a nice follow through after all this hesitation that was taking place last 2 weeks before. Um, this week we did get the breakthrough above that, push up, create a new high. And then there was a little bit of a hesitation near the top, right? For me, what it seems like is a lot of sellers were waiting here um, to enter any position either on any pullbacks or some slowdowns in price action. So it seems more of buyers exhaustion than any resistance, because I would think the major resistance is going to sit here around, if I'm not mistaken, the 608 area. um for me, that's more of a heavier resistance, right? We have one, two, three, four, five, six, seven touches, right? So like if we wanted to resist and drop anywhere, I would think 608 would be a clean area to actually have some type of rejection. We did not get that this week. And you can look at price action throughout the week and kind of see what I mean by this, where we have this slow grind up and then aggressive selling that takes place, right? These are just sellers um stepping in very strongly, taking out all the anticipation buyers, right? The ones that hope for another level or expect another level to be tapped and just get eaten up and then aggressive selling starts to take place right after that, right? If you have a support that's holding for such a long time and it's just slowly grinding up, we're not getting any follow through. The moment sellers have enough strength to just break us down below that support, typically now you're gonna have sellers that are gonna, or buyers either gonna switch sides or they're gonna hedge against their current position by taking a put, and then you have these aggressive selling that is taking place, and that's kind of happened what
So
happened all week last week. Why do you not post the weekly market? I see daily posts. Oh, I can do that if you want. I didn't know if you guys were um interested in like all the massive levels that I give out, but if you do want that, I can give you all my levels right after the live if that makes it easier for you. Or are you talking about the news? Oh, the news. Okay, yeah, I'll also do that. I'll do that after this live. I haven't been posting it because we do have Josh here and Ren. They both have been posting it in the daily update every morning. So first thing first, when you open up the server and you start your day, I would highly suggest you look at the daily update. Um, they pretty much tell you what the news is for the day and what are any significant ones that are going to be there. Um, it's easier than having like a large post of it. And if you want the large post, I can do that. But they pretty much go day by day and post it for you guys. Alrighty. So heading back to our daily here, what we have here for the last, I think I wrote it down here in my notes here, about 13 days, right? So 13 candles here, where we're kind of tapping this 5 day, trying to hold this uptrend this entire time, right? It's a little bit of a hesitation here, small body candles grinding us up. We're in an uptrend, but it's not the most cleanest, right? A clean uptrend is going to be some nice large body candles on an uptrend similar like this. We kind of had this slow grind to the upside here, and this week we actually finally broke below the 5 day moving average. So this is the first time we had a breakdown underneath the five. We actually had a little bit of a rejection as well on the daily time frame at our 5 day moving average. So if you guys remember last week, I mentioned that we've been grinding on this 5 day for quite some time. It hasn't been any strong follow through out of it. What I wanted to see the next step here is going to be when the 5 day turns into some sort of resistance and our 20 day becomes some type of solid support, and then that's where we get those explosive moves. So we're kind of approaching that here, right? Where we have the rejection of the five here. Now our next step is to see if the 20 daily moving average becomes our support. If not, then more than likely we could have a deeper pullback here towards our 200 daily moving average here. That puts us where we have major volume in this 560 area here. There's obviously as well as a gap here, right? So when we break this 200 or even test this 200, it's not out of the woods for us to just at least attempt to fill this gap, right? That's almost a given, right? We break underneath, even if we break underneath and then shoot right back up. Um, and that's very possible as well. But one thing I'm going to be looking at is to see if our 20 day accesses some type of support. This 590 here is our large volume note in this range that we're here. So not only is a retest and failure of the 20 going to be your clue, but I would think the failure at 590 would be a much stronger sentiment for any strong downside. So if I start seeing the 20 start to fail and the 590 area starts, we lose that large volume note here, more than likely we could get that test of the 200 shortly, especially this week. I know it sounds like a pretty large range, but we do have OPEX and we have major news, right? So we have major news coming in on Wednesday. where we could basically have something that happens like this, where we have that retest, we start to fail the 20 here, and we're sitting at five, just underneath, let's say 589, 588, and then rate cut, we decide to cut rates, and then next thing you know, we are back above 605, and we're in the 610 level trying to test all-time highs. That's very, very possible to have a $20 move, 15 $20 move on SPY after this news. As well as if we start to have these failures leading in to Wednesday, where we've been just slowly grinding up like this, and then Wednesday comes and we're sitting at the 200, the news is negative, very easy for us to have a push back down towards our safety zone near the 560. So I would be on the lookout for that this week to see if that's something that takes place on the retest of our 20. That's going to be the major thing. I want to see this turn into support. As long as this is temporary resistance, this needs to turn into some type of support for us to break over it, and then it starts to catch up. And then that's when we really will see some explosive moves. And we've had that on IWM recently, right? Where IWM started to have that 5-day as a resistance. 20-day became a little bit of a support. And we had that crunch where price was basically being compressed between those two moving averages. And the moment one gave up and we had price push through one of them, we had a very explosive move on IWM, right? And we had those gap ups and gap ups and gap ups. So going into this week, as you see, they are closing in. So it's going to be quite interesting to see what actually takes place this week. Going into our pathing here, I'm going to keep it fairly short because like I said, we have major news, we do have a short week. It would be I personally think it would be difficult to give you a perfect ideal setup without enough time to either build that liquidity, and then also where we have a news catalyst that could just throw any technicals out the window. So for me specifically, as for now, we're just gonna look at it as a short term thing, right? Until we are proven, until we are shown otherwise, right? Based on price action. For now, what I'm seeing is I'm looking for similar to last week. I'm looking for a head and shoulders to play out here, um, around this range. So we did not get that break in near the 200 or the 20-day moving average. I mentioned last week that first liquidity grab is going to be the failures of the 5 outside of our trend channel here, right? We were in this for quite some time. I'm going to clear the drawings. Let's just go through last week for just a second. All right, so we were in this trend channel for quite some time this week, right? We're just kind of been grinding in this. And I mentioned once we have a break out of this channel, we're gonna look for a 5-day rejection and see how strong the follow through was. Unfortunately, I did not trade this afternoon, but I did see it drop really crazy, which was a little bit of FOMO on my part, but I did see the rejection of the 5-day take place later in the afternoon. I ended up cutting it somewhere around here, and then we had this huge follow through towards the end of the day. It really wasn't doing too much when I got into the market a little bit mid in the morning here, but basically what we were looking at last week and the week before was just to see us break out of this channel here, right? This was our resistance and our support above and within our 20-day moving average here. Once we had the failures and then the rejection here, we had that strong push down. Our next step is going to look for our 20-day. We're going to have it catch up. It's going to be quite up higher, actually. 20-day should be right here. Since we pushed down so far, it's going to catch up. 20-day is going to be somewhere around here. And essentially, we want to look to see if we have this 20-day bounce. Most likely, we will get a bounce near the 20-day. I want to see how that bounce takes place. All right, do we have a bounce that kind of chops us in this range here, right? You see this liquidity grab to the upside, lack of direction, right? Before we had some type of catalyst, that broke us out and created a range expansion here, right? We had this compression here. This is like 2 days of price. This is a whole day of price action, pretty much, where we're just kind of chopping around here within this liquidity grab, right? The upper bounds of our range and essentially the lower bounds of our upper range here. So this is really where I'm gonna see the right shoulder play out for our head and shoulders. It's gonna be somewhere right around here where the 5.9 where we're definitely not closing over 5.99. 5.99 is going to invalidate it's going to invalidate the head and shoulders temporarily. um don't want to have You want to have either an equal shoulder, or preferably a very strong head and shoulders is going to have a lower right shoulder. So looking for something like this would be more ideal, and your clue is going to be the break out of this channel here, or basically the failures at 595. Right, 595. We could have a bounce here, and then your second reload is going to be the break of the 590 here. Right, so essentially we'll have this head and shoulders breakout, breakdown here. We'll get this little bounce here, could create another head and shoulders on the way down. With our I'll look to see if I can create another trend here. This is just a rough sketch, so I'm kind of I want to see what trends play out, but most likely we could get a smaller head and shoulders here that builds out on the breakdown, where the rejection is going to be inside of this blue liquidity channel here. So the main thing you're going to be looking for this week is essentially to see how the 20-day reacts, and to see if we get the break out of this channel here, this trend channel. So as you see, the break of these trend channels have some massive moves, right? Rejection of these yellow channels have some massive moves down. Supports have some decent pushes up. And that's essentially what we've been doing for quite some time. Even if I look back here where we had this as a resistance, strong push through, strong retest, right? So we want to see the right shoulder build out right around here. And then as far as upside, what I'm going to be looking for is, even with the downside, I'm also looking at, do I have orange? Yes, I do. All right. So the other thing I'm going to be looking at is to see how our channel here builds out. So this is our pullback channel, our selling channel. It's not necessarily super aggressive. Something more aggressive would be that would be in the green. We did break out of it, so I didn't bother to leave it because it was kind of a flat day, right? We pushed up and came right back to the start. So I'm focusing mostly on the orange channel here. I want to see a breakout of this channel for any upside, as well as indicators for our right shoulder, right? We're not going to, we could continue. I'm not going to say we can't, but we could continue down into this channel indefinitely and have selling until buyers step in very heavily, or we have some type of news catalyst that breaks us out of this channel here. But what I want to look for is to see if we have a break here. The break here is going to give you, either we're going to get that right shoulder, or what we could have happen here is we could have an inverse that takes place. I want to see the right shoulder a little bit higher, right? So I have it roughly here, but let's do it. Let's do it right roughly here, where we have the right shoulder right here. We have this inverse head and shoulders here. Our right shoulder kind of will correspond with our 5-day. So the recapture of our 5 daily moving average will give us that right shoulder for the inverse head and shoulders. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking for, is to see if we can recapture the 5-day here. This is our liquidity channel here. This is essentially where sellers stepped in several times here. So when we build out this shoulder, more than likely, as you see here, where we have several days of several hours of consolidation up here, more than likely what we will see is slow grind here, where this trend is going to be slight resistance for some time, developing that liquidity for our breakout. And the breakout's going to happen right around here. Kind of corresponds with the 601 602 area, depending on where we are. So if we do build out the shoulder, and the shoulder is somewhere right here, then it would be 601. But it really depends on the break of this purple trend here, resistance here. Um, this is our liquidity zone here. So we have a liquidity zone here for the bulls to have a breakout here. And then we have the liquidity zone here for the bears to have the breakout here. So those are the two things I'm going to be looking at this week. Looking for the inverse. Like I said, the shoulder is going to be right here above 599, but specifically on the recapture of the 5-day moving average and push through. I know it sounds like it would be difficult to do that, right? So if we have, like, let's say this week we have some pushes down, right? When we do have news on Tuesday, right? So say the news is good and it pushes us back here and we start to get a little hopeful. The 5-day is still going to be here. The moment we have decent news from our Fed speakers here, we can recapture the 5-day pretty strongly. And the moment we clear the 5-day, right, we have that strong, huge volume over the 5-day, buyers will step in fairly heavily. So you don't necessarily have to wait for the right shoulder to have some type of consolidation in this area. If we do get it early where we have the reclaim of the 5-day, which is sitting right here, the 5 daily moving average, if we have the reclaim of that with some volume following our Fed news, um, it'd be just as clean of a right shoulder as just a breakout retest and just shoot to the moon, right? We don't necessarily need some type of consolidation in this area, even though it would be nice to have some type of consolidation here, kind of grind us here to have some explosive upside. But like I said, we don't necessarily need it. Our main thing is going to be this week is to see if we have our orange channel here, if it is going to continue to be strong, or we have some type of stronger selling that takes place, right? Say we have a breakout here, and then now we have some deeper selling pressure that takes place like this, right? That's going to be sort of your activation for the right shoulder, right? We're going to have this breakout, trying to build that right shoulder. Once we have the breakout of this yellow here, we're gonna get that green downtrend, and that's gonna really push us down towards the bottom. And especially if we break out of this 590 target, I'm thinking more towards this 585, but we could push lower based on the news. Alrighty, that's it for that. I'll try to update you guys this week, but like I said, we have news this month on Wednesday. Most of what we expect can be completely unexpected once we do have this rate cut decision, even if it's not good. We're in a downtrend. I mean, if it does nothing, even if we're on let's say we're on a downtrend or an uptrend right before the news that's going to be either expected, unexpected, or it does no major effect to the market's just going to follow whatever trend it is in at that moment, because we do have OPEX on Friday. So you have um option expiry on Friday, and then we have a holiday on Thursday, right? Theta kills you despite the market being open or not. Hence, any move or any price action that happens Monday leading up to this news, either we have a reversal in the current trend, or we continue the trend that we're in strongly and very abruptly, leading in, so that way positions can be closed and not have to have a sizable position going into Friday with your theta continuing to decay. Um, so let's go ahead and look at our QQQ here briefly. As far as our sectors, there was not too much for me to mention on the sectors. We do have a little bit of a rotation in our healthcare sector, our XLV, and we do have a little bit of a pullback off the highs on our SMH, our semiconductors. So nothing worth too crazy to mention. Our high yields bonds did reject around the 79.60 area that I was mentioning last week, but did not have any major follow through. It was expected to have a resistance there. That was our major trend resistance. But sticking to our QQQ here for a second. So with QQQ, similar situation here. Let's see if I can pull up the volume profile so that way it looks a little bit better. See if it cleans it up. Trying to get more of a range, but I guess not. Okay. So with our QQQ, some of it's just by I'm not seeing a major rejection just yet, right? So we have a slight uh resistance at this 530 to 533 area, right? This major trend resistance is basically at the top of our value area for this upper bounds range here for some time, or even let's just look at this upper bound range here off the highs, right? Because I would consider this an upper bound range once we created a new high in the structure here. So this was pretty much our resistance for some time, right? We did have a tap last week. This week we did have a test here. We didn't get any follow through, but I would not call that a major resistance, right? A major resistance is going to happen when we have it could, let's say, let me look for a candle here to maybe kind of give you a clue of what major resistance would be. So major resistance could look like this candle right here. It could also look like this green candle right here. Could look like these green candles, right? So we didn't really have much of a major resistance here, right? We created a higher high, higher low here. I would think a major rejection in this area would at least take us out 50%, if not engulf this entire candle. We did not get that this week. We did not get any major rejection above here. We just sort of had buyers start to exhaust near the top, right? We You can see by the charts we just have these slow grinds down, sharp dips down, and then slow grinds down, right? That's kind of what price action was this whole week, where we have these slow moves up and then sharp drops down, slow moves up and then sharp drops down, and that kind of corresponds with our testing this upper bounds of this range here, right? We didn't have buyers step in heavily to push us above, um, especially with QQQ, and you'll see in IWM as well. I was looking at last week. We were looking for a pullback last week. We didn't get it. We did have strong continuation, and I've been saying for like the last 2 weeks that I want to see a decent pullback, something that's healthy. Um, Even filling this gap to just get this out of the way to have us push up. We don't need to fill a gap, but if any pushes down here, the closer we get to the gap, the more we expect the gap to get filled. So if we have any sort of pullback, even if we pull back and test the gap, that still is not going to break our weekly structure. So I've been looking for some type of indicator that we're going to have a little bit of a pullback, and based off our sellers starting to step in slightly, but more than anything else, our buyers are starting to wither out near the upper bounds, right? Because why would you enter a long position here if we're so close to the highs, right? Wouldn't you want to enter a long once we start to break out of those highs, right? Because you want to see, once we test those highs, we're going to have sellers. You want to absorb those sellers and then you push towards newer highs, right? So we do have that little bit of a hesitation near the top here. So I do want to see a little bit of a pullback here. My major thing is going to be this 521 area. It's right around here. 521. I do want to see if we do have any pullback. I do want to see this 521 hold up. 521.25. I do have it in my notes there. That's a major volume note area, major volume area that I'm looking at. I want to, even if we do get a pullback to test that area, it wouldn't change our trend here. I'm worried about a failures there because we would have a break underneath not only our 20-day moving average, but we would lose a major volume note here, the center mass of our upper bounds range, and it'll just kind of give us that push straight towards the 200 or even the gap fill. So 521.25 for me is going to be an important area on QQQ to watch to make sure there's no failures near there. That's going to be your major volume note support. But like I said, I do want to see a little bit of a pullback here. With this sort of slight rejection at the top here, let's go to the daily time frame for a second, and you can see similar situation is happening here, right? Where we're kind of hovering the 5 day. We just aren't getting buyers that are following through strongly, right? We just have supporting at our 5 day trend. So we're basically supporting an uptrend, but not having a follow through. So right when this starts to take place, you want to see a little bit of a pullback and a test of either a huge volume note or volume area, or a retest of larger trend support, right? So larger trend support, it's going to be like one of your moving averages, a larger dated moving average. For example, the 20 or 200 or even the 50, right? But our 50 is quite some time below, right? We're just started to get change our trend here. So it's going to be a little bit away before we even have this. I wouldn't want to see the 50 cross above the 200 before we even get some 50-day retest, or even consider it to be something to be considered, really. So I want to see right here, same thing with SPY, where we have the slight rejection at the 5 day. I want to see the 20-day turn into some type of support, while the 5 day is some type of resistance. Let me close it out a little bit here. While the 5 day is some type of resistance, so let's have the 5 day like this, our 20-day kind of curl like this, and I want to see that compression in that range. While we continue to have the rejection here, right? We can have a look below the 20. The breaking under the 20 is not going to be your cue to short. Breaking under your 20 and rejecting at the 20 is going to be your cue. So we can have look belows. We can have look belows until we have that retest of our 20, our 5, and then we have the breakout once we clear our highs. That's what I'm going to be looking for, to see if we continue to have the short-term resistance. It's going to keep compressing. We need a compression in the within this range here, right? And a pullback here near this 520, 521 area could possibly give us that, right? We had it on IWM. In a second here, I'll go to IWM and we'll talk about what we were looking at last week, but we're starting to see that take place here on QQQ and SPY. I want to see that compression take place and we get that range expansion. More than likely, we could also have both ends here happen, with our 200-day going to be that support for the downside, going to be the target for the downside. And our upside obviously is going to be a break out of our previous swing highs here. I would say 540 break, then it's really essentially blue skies. So let's see what takes place this week. I just want to keep looking at, I'm going to keep stressing, we have the 5 day turn into some type of resistance. That was our first step. 5 day must turn into some type of resistance. We need the 20-day to act as some support. Even if we're in a short week, we could reject at the 5 of the 20, continue here, and then once this 20-day becomes a support, that's when the explosive move will happen. So we need to see if that takes place here. Otherwise, what we could have is a rejection of the 5, a failure at the 20, and then we have price correction at the 200. Price, same way that price corrects itself intraday with VWAP on a larger time frame, especially the daily, the weekly, we can have our 200-day retest be that validation and price action, right? Where we're just like, we validate right here and we're like, all right, I think we continue to have an uptrend. Or otherwise we validate and fail, and then let's say we're no longer on this uptrend for the time being. So I'm going to look at this week to see if that plays out. I did, like I said, post all my notes in my channel, so it'll be a little bit more, a slightly more in depth, I would say. Not too much. Like I said, I am just going day by day until this news comes out on Wednesday. So for our downside pathing, what I'm going to be looking for, something simple, nothing too crazy. So we had this selling that was taking place earlier that was pretty aggressive. All we did was essentially gap up out of it and stall before a buyer stepped in a little bit here. So I think that's an optimal position with all this volume to be our right shoulder for head and shoulders here. So I'm looking to see if our right shoulder is that 5 day rejection, and the completion of the head and shoulders is going to be the failure at the 20-day, or even the break out of this trend channel. So let's draw it out a little bit more clearly, where we have the right shoulder here, our head here. And we essentially will have the 5 day, um, it is our resistance. The break above it, it's going to invalidate as well. But we want to see this. Here's our 20-day catching up, the break out of our 20-day here, failures there, and then break our trend channel here is where we're going to have some downside, right? That kind of corresponds with some failures at this 521.25 area for our push down. And our weekly expected low is around this 514.50 area, 514.75 area. So if we do have a failure out of this trend here and a break underneath our 20-day moving average, then we have that head and shoulders playing out, failures at the 20, losing our major volume note, then we can have that 415. That's going to be a clean move down to the downside. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking at this week. I want to see what type of selling that takes place. You notice here we don't have an orange selling that we have in SPY, right? It's not as clean. It wasn't taking place similar to how SPY was. What we do have is a little bit of some, I would say, more consolidation. Let's do pink because I don't have magenta, right? So we do have some controlled pullback here on QQQ. So that leads me to pretty much where the inverse could possibly be. The same thing taking place, right? I know I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's going to change a little bit on IWM, but not too much. Um, but the same thing I'm looking at for upside is going to be the head being the bounce off this 20-day moving average and our right shoulder. So basically, let's start from the beginning, right? So I drew it a little bit easier on my drawings there, but we basically had an inverse head and shoulder breakout. Then we have an inverse head and shoulder breakout. This breakout what didn't have any follow through now, so maybe we do need some correction around this area, right? We had this area where we essentially strong sellers and then slow buyers, right? So this area didn't have any liquidity really being built, and we're starting to build that this week, right? So this is kind of where I'm seeing the our inverse head and shoulders could take place right around here, and the same thing takes place where it's going to be the recapture of the 5 day moving average, whether it is consolidation near it or the positive news that pushes us through that 5 day with volume. That's going to be your right shoulder. As long as we have enough volume that pushes us through something like our 5 day moving average, um, pretty much essentially putting us back in this upper bounds of this range here with some significant volume, that will be our right shoulder for our inverse. So we don't need some type of push here and consolidate in this range and then wait for the breakout for our inverse head and shoulders. We could likely have a push down that's deep like this. The news comes out 5 days right here. We have a straight breakthrough of it. We may get a retest. We may not even get a retest, and it'll just continue to follow through with some significant volume, and that will be your right shoulder. So we don't necessarily have to wait for some type of consolidation to create the shoulder. So that's what I'll be looking at. So let's see if this is our right shoulder. There's enough volume here. This whole area is essentially your right shoulder. So you want to see our left shoulder, our head build up off of the 20-day, and our right shoulder is going to be somewhere around in this range here, this 530 area, right? That we've been struggling. So if we at least can break and hold the 530 area, break over the 20, that's going to be your breakout. You could very well wait for the break of our trend here and then look for our highs towards the 540 area. That's also very possible. Like if you want to play it safe and just wait for this trend line break, that's also very possible. For the downside, you can also wait for the trend line break on our purple here as well. This is just our range that we've been in for a while. We have some consolidation could be our head and our right shoulder building out shortly here within this purple trend. So as far as downside to the upside, either one takes place essentially on the break of a purple trend here. So that's going to be something I'm looking at this week to see how it takes place. Um, Essentially, your 5 day and your 20 day, same thing that was with IWM, same thing we're looking at this week on QQQ and SPY. Whichever one gives in first. Do we lose the 20 and flush? Do we bounce off the 20, recapture the 5 and pump? Those That's essentially what we were waiting for on IWM. I'm gonna go to IWM right now and kind of show you guys that um in a second here. Let's just go through the weekly for a moment. So with IWM, same thing. Um, oh, that's not IWM. It's QQQ. All right. So with IWM this week, this is the interesting thing about IWM, right? So on the weekly structure, I'm leaning neutral. As I go into the daily, I'm starting to lean more bearish, and as I go into smaller time frames, I'm leaning more bearish, right? But on a larger time frame, I'm a little bit more neutral. So what that tells me is I'm not going to be looking to anticipate any price action on IWM. I just want to see some follow through in any direction, right? So we have these gaps that are continuing to happen. I'll go in the weekly time frame and you'll on the hourly, and you'll see that we have these gaps that are gapping up, gapping down, gapping up, gapping down. There's a little bit of indecision, and all you're essentially having is we gap up, we have a push follow through, and then we gap down, we have a push down, and we follow through slightly. There is no real choice of direction. It's just essentially where do we open? Let's keep going, and that's essentially what IW has been doing. But for our weekly here, the reason that I'm saying that I'm leaning neutral and not bearish, right, is our 200-day retest here, right? So we had a test of this is one of our major main resistance here, right? Our main resistance here for me, this it says 521, but it's essentially the 519 520 area. It's just showing it because of the area that that's visible on my chart. But 520 519 520, that's your major volume resistance on IWM. A rejection here is what's going to give you some stronger moves down, and even our recapture is going to give us some stronger moves up as well. But the thing is, we didn't have that major volume, no, right? We have this gap here, you notice, right? We have solid support near this 200 range. Our upper bounds volume note is that 219 220 area. We didn't even get there yet, right? We didn't get a clear rejection above. We rejected at our 200-day moving average on the daily time frame, right? That's expected. That's not out of the woods. We had a test. We didn't have a rejection and follow through, and we just started to fail. We just stopped at the 200-day, which is to be expected. Our one of our soft, I would say, a soft resistance in any trend, right, is the 200-day. If you're looking at penny stocks and you're looking at medium cap stocks, or you look at any ticker, right, that test of the 200 is usually where you're gonna put your exit, and you wait to see if price does not fall, right? If it doesn't fall, then you can look for a break of the 200 to try to look for some newer highs, right? Either look back in the past, or you go by psych numbers. Fortunately, with IWM, we do have something to look back on. So we had that retest of the 200, but we did not have any failures here, right? Or we're still over the 20, we're over the 50. We're slightly underneath the 5, but nothing too major. So we had a slight resistance at an area that is expected to be a resistance. For me, that's leaning a little bit neutral. I'm not super scared by it. The only thing that I am slightly worried about, I didn't bring it up on SPY or QQQ. I forgot to bring it, but essentially, this week's uh this week's let's go to the daily here. There you go. On daily, it looks better on IWM. You notice here where on Friday, this is where I start to change my perspective, right? The daily is when I start looking a little bit more bearish, right? For the weekly, I said, I retested the 200, as expected, soft pullback, right? I'm neutral. I'm looking to see if we have continued follow through on the pullback. We're not there yet. So on the daily though, what I did notice is This is 63 days or 40, was it 48? I think, or 48, 48 or something like that. Um, days of trading days. So 48 candles, right? It's 48 trading days and 63 days in general of price action where we did not have sell volume that significant. The last time we had one was in towards the midpoint of April. So and this retest of our 200 we of course was a soft pullback, then we start having this rejection of the 5 day. We once we got to the 20, it for now it's temporary support because we had resistance around this area. That's now going to be that support, right? That 209 area that we were looking at for a little like a week or two behind. And even back here, right, this 209 area we're looking at it. So it's expected that to be as a support, but I did see our volume is significantly higher. We engulfed all of this range of price action as far as volume wise, and this one singular day, right? We had this very aggressive move here, right? For me, that could suggest that we might lead we're leading into a little bit of a sector rotation, right? Where we could maybe have a little bit more pullback on the tech side and our small caps here. And maybe we're going to be putting more money into like financial sectors or healthcare sectors or more safer assets, right? We might see our Pepsis, our Walmarts, and stuff like that start to have a run. Um, that could be a potential. I'm not rushing to that conclusion just yet, but with us having this volume that took out pretty much this entire move here, that for me is a slight suggestion that we might be in the works for a rotation, right? And with our OPEX coming this week, where we had essentially two back to back expiries of an uptrend, usually with each expiry for a monthly expiry, we usually have, um, you know, the trend doesn't always continue in one direction. It usually has some type of pullback. Sometimes we flip flop. Sometimes it's a bullish month, bearish month, a bullish month, a bearish month. We literally could be flipping back and forth. But these last two OPEXs, we just had push ups, push ups, and push ups. So for this one to be closing in now, and we have this rate cut decision, it's not out of the woods for us to have going into the summer, especially with lower volume. So July June, the mid June into July is probably one of the harder months to trade. We have the lowest volume. There's not many things happening. Summer trading is extremely difficult. You see these moves that we saw on Thursday of this week where price kind of stalled for what 4 hours in a dollar range. That's expected. That's summer spy for you, right? That's expected. So now going to this OPEX with these larger volumes here, and we're going into a summer month. um I don't think it's wrong to assume that we might have a little bit of a pullback here, right? Do we get those, not only the gap area fills, right, on SPY and QQQ, but do we have our 50 days start to become something in like of interest, right? Our 50-day has yet to catch up to price action. We've had 60 days pretty much, right? Two OPEXs of just upwards momentum. Our 50-day did not catch up. All we have is our 20-day and our 5-day catching up. Our 200-day is just sitting at, we had an aggressive move down. So any small push up is going to be, easy for us to kind of clear the 200 once again, or like I even test the 200 because we don't have much days, this year to like kind of have the 200 be severely below us, but our 50-day is really below us. So it's not out of the woods, I think, for a sector rotation where we have some sort of pullback that brings us back into this 50-day. All right. That doesn't invalidate any trends. On SPY and QQQ, it does not invalidate any trend. Where we have an uptrend here, breakout, and we just have a lower high here. That doesn't invalidate our trend. We could continue to go up, right? So a lower high near the 50 on any of the charts is not going to invalidate anything. So that's just, for me, a little theory that I have going on. to see maybe we possibly can have a rotation taking place here. But one thing I did want to mention here that I was talking about on SPY and QQQ is this right here, right where we had the 5 day turn into a resistance. Our 20-day became support slightly for some time. We had the breakout, retest our five, and we just had these pushes up, right? I know it doesn't look that crazy, but we're talking about IWM, right? It essentially, for me, it's crazy because we gapped and gapped and gapped, right? That to me is just as big as SPY moving a huge big candle, right? To gap up, IWM is just quite literally pushing up, right? After we had this expansion, to me, that's still a range expansion, even if there was not too much follow through towards the highs. So maybe we have something like this takes place on SPY and QQQ where we have that compression. We don't have much news coming into Monday. We do have retail core sales that are coming on Tuesday. Um, so that could be a little bit of a news to push us out above the 5 day or near the 5 day. Then we have our pal speaking on Wednesday. Maybe we get that push through, or maybe we get the squeeze down. Uh, so I'm going to be looking out for that. As far as the daily, nothing major to say here. Like I said, we just have some rejection at the 200. We did have strong momentum once we rejected at the 5 day. We had some strong momentum down towards the 20. You know, the clue being that we had large volume here, um and it essentially engulfed several days of price action, and pretty much this entire, you could just look at the week, it engulfed the week's uh volume range as well. But we're just essentially tapped to 20, nothing too major until we lose that 20-day moving average. Specifically, I'm looking at this note here. I have it, the level on my my notes, I believe. So yeah, so basically this 205 206 area, we start to fail under there, more than likely we will have that 50-day retest on IWM. So that's what I'm looking at to see if we have this major volume note fail here, right? So we had slight resistance. We need our major volume area to support at this 205 area for us to continue to the upside, or are we gonna get that rotation that I was speaking about, right? Let's go to the week or hourly here, just to look at some pathing because we're running a little bit low on time now. I'm gonna go through it quickly. Our pathing here, nothing too much to say. Let's start with the bearish pathing. Um, so for our bearish pathing, similar thing, I'm looking for a head and shoulders right here. Our 208 here, 209, sorry, 209 was considerable resistance for some time here. Why not have it be a perfect area to build some volume for the downside as well? Now, if you look at, oh, hold on, how did I do that? Oh, there we go. Now, if you look at, we were looking at QQQ and SPY, right? We were looking for this trend to start to break out of the 20-day. We're starting to see that on IWM off, like already, right? So that's why I keep saying the more closer in time frame, or the lower the time frame, the more I'm leaning bearish on IWM. But on the larger time frame, like the daily and the weekly, it's not too crazy to expect a pullback. But on the smaller time frame, you're just like, wow, this is a, potentially a really deep pullback that could take place. So a little bit of conflicting feelings that I have there, but needless to say, we're looking for the right shoulder to start to form here on IW1. We were looking at it last week. It did not full complete. So we were looking at last week. This was the right shoulder here. We did not get the full completion just yet. We still have some time. The completion is really going to be when we start failing at this the 20-day moving average. We start failing under 209 here. Um, that's going to be the continuation of our right shoulder, right? It's going to be the break as well of this channel here. That's going to be the right shoulder, or you can at least look for, if you want to play more cautious, right? You could look for the right shoulder break, but it's, for me, I think the target goal is going to be this 205 area, 206. We could have a bounce here, or more than likely we could create further downside, right? That's just a weird pathing. I just drew it out. However, right, we have a bounce here, and then we fail to 205, and then we have more follow through towards the downside. So you can either have take the break of our trend here on the right shoulder, where we have not fully had the completion yet. We're you know didn't get it all the way, um, or you just wait for the bounce at the 205 206 area to start to short underneath that break of the 205 area. You could look for that as well. One thing I'm going to be looking for is, if you notice here, I have two trends that are playing out. So do we have this smaller orange trend here? This is more of, um I would say, uh it's selling with major volume, but in a fixed range. So it's not really aggressive that's taking place, right? So that's kind of why I have it in orange, right? It's we do have some selling taking place, but once we do, we have this settling that takes place that tests it, and then once again we push down, right? We bounce off of it and we reject again. So it's just essentially doing this, right? But in more of a fixed range. For me, I want to see if we do have continuation here, right? We can have a temporary break here. Um, we start to, either consolidate around this area, and then we get the 509 break, or I believe, I could be wrong, but I do believe that the 20-day is going to be catching up here. It based on when we start dipping low, your moving averages actually shoot up, right? They catch up quite fast. So I'm expecting our 20-day to possibly go up a little bit on IWM, and that could be where we have that consolidation and we start to reject, and then you wait for the trend break or the 209 area break for some downside towards 205. That's something you could look for. Um, but one thing I'm looking at is to see what type of selling do we have here. So, oh, you can see here we have a green trend here that's basically aggressive selling. And what do I mean by that? We have increased selling pressure, right? So volume is increasing rapidly after a push down, right? So I want to see if we have some follow through here. Do we have a follow through? Do we continue following in this channel? Maybe I develop the channel. I'm not holding firmly on this area of the channel. So I want to see what happens this week. Do we have a little bit of a pullback towards here, where I kind of have the channel look like something like this, where we have a bounce off this area here, we start to reject, and then stronger selling that takes place like this. Um, that's to be found out later, but we don't know for sure. For now, I'm looking at this trend here. As long as it's holding this green trend, I'm going to assume that it's continuing to go down. If we break this orange here, that's just going to continue to confirm the downtrend, and we use our green trend line here. It has not become a channel just yet, but it is definitely a trend. We could continue to sell here until we break out of this. It's going to be an aggressive selling that is taking place. So I'm going to look out to see what takes place there. And as far as the upside, you're going to see broken record, but similar situation. We're just looking at, this was the area that I was mentioning on the daily here, where we kind of had a little bit of uh little price action in this range here. We start to we have these little pushes up that gaps us constantly. We don't have major follow through here. It's 209 area. So what I'm seeing that could possibly be taking place is we finally filled this area with some volume. It's a slight gap in our volume range, right? So what I would want to see is similar situation where we have an inverse head and shoulders take place right here. Same thing. Our 20-day becomes support. The 5-day breakover is going to be the right shoulder. Same thing. I know broken record. I know it's no different on any of them, but when our 5-day and our 20-day starts to crunch here, and we have that 5-day turn into that resistance, you want to see the 20 turn into support. The break of the 5 when the 20-day turns into support is explosive moves. And we've seen it already on IWM. So I want to see if that takes place here, especially with our news this week. So I would love to see that take place this week. Um, Similar situation with all the tickers. You could just wait for this trend to break here, right? The right shoulder could be somewhere right here, and you just look for the break here, and then that would be your cue for the upside. It could break here. That will be your cue for the upside. So you just want to see this liquidity area break out for your cues for the upside. So it doesn't matter where it does it, as long as it breaks out of this liquidity area here for the upside. That is where your right shoulder is going to be. Most likely, your 5 days is going to correspond. Your 5 days is going to correspond with that area being the inverse head and shoulders area right here. So that's one thing I'm going to be looking at for this week. Hopefully that made sense to you guys. Once again, all my news is going to be in my channel. Any other notes that I have, I'll try to let you guys know in that channel as well as Mr. Joshua and Ren will post every single day in the morning. They post basically your daily update. Josh posts your major indices, how they've been reacting, how they're opening for the day, how they've been doing overnight, and then Ren usually posts our current news for the week, or at least for the day. Sorry, and the importance of it. So be on the lookout for that. If you guys have any other questions, do let me know. Gonna go ahead and end the recording here.